Marginalization in Kenya is a significant problem, impacting multiple communities after many decades of failure to recognize and address the problem of certain communities being excluded from the political, social, and economic life of the larger nation. Such communities have become vulnerable to exploitation in many ways of life. Pastoralists are such minority group who remain vulnerable whatsoever. That is why Center for Minority Right Development Semiride came on board to try and educate these communities about their rights. And next month, beginning 5th to 7th, the organization will host a delegate of 200 members from the pastoralist divide to educate them on how they can participate in key decision-making at their county government level.
Is that most of the pastoral areas are highly marginalized. The question of inclusivity is a problem. One, because of clanism, and at the same time because of the literacy levels, which is the worst the world over. The other thing is because of the remoteness. So when you, and also the livelihoods, ensure that certain participatory forums are not accessible. People are really fighting about food security. People are moving from, because of increased mobility, looking for pasture and water, then mobilizing people to participate in governance processes becomes a challenge. So this year, I think we're going to have the 3 activities, that is the conference itself. And the other one would be a gala night. We want to be able to demonstrate, for example, the contribution of pastoralism to the cultural life of this state. Many of us wouldn't understand that, for example, livestock plays a major role. Meat, for example, when you talk about nyama choma, what percentage comes from pastoralist areas? We want people to sample the pastoralist cuisine, for example, and understand.
According to International Work Group for Indigenous Affairs report released this year, it is a fact that the marginalized communities such as pastoralist land has been used as exploration resource areas, and in the end they have lost most of their lands to extractive sectors such as Talo Oil Company and the anticipated geothermal plant due to be erected in Kapedo. And according to Yobo, the long border conflicts between communities around should be resolved with deep involvement of the 2 communities, that is the Pokot and Turkana, before things get out of hand.
This conference is particularly about evaluating all this and ensuring, campaigning and advocating for the right policy frameworks to ensure that communities are not defrauded of their own natural resources, which essentially is what they live on. Many of them are not bankers, they're not teachers, they're not professionals, so they depend on the natural resources. You'd be interested to find out that some of these areas that are being taken up are principally very, very useful areas for these communities. You're talking about water, wetlands, for example, like in Tana River. You're talking about places near Kapedo where we know we're going to have a 15,000 megawatts installation, for example, geothermal installation. So communities are like, you're taking land from places where exactly our animals depend on. Where do we go? To drier areas. And take note of the fact that some of these marginal communities have suffered. All the conservancies, main conservancies that we have, game parks, when you talk about Lake Bogoria, for example, these are the places where people would take their animals to either get water, greener pasture than any other places. We are talking about medicinal herbs that they depended on, but you'd find a situation where the government would come just and gazette the area as a game reserve, and people are forced to languish without consent, without due compensation.
Poor access in northern Kenya has rendered the region hostile. Insecurity has become the order of the day due to cattle rustling culture, a culture that has been transformed into banditry, a horror that has taken the nation by surprise. 3 weeks ago, 19 police officers were murdered, and in response, the government launched a military operation to flush out bandits who carried out the attack. In view of this, massive force has been used to even innocent people. Thus, Semiride is opposed to the idea.
The manner in which, for example, we try to stem this challenge. And one of the things that you don't do is to mete out what we call collective punishment on a part of a population that is not necessarily directly linked to banditry. This is in clear contravention of international human rights laws. For instance, if you collectively punish a community, then you are almost moving towards the direction of genocide and massacre. And remember, Kenya has not ratified what we call the genocide, convention, meaning that you can have certain selective punishments directed at a community, either to injure them collectively as a group or to decimate them. This is one of the calls that I'm making to the government. They should be able to do that. We have very fresh memories of what happened in the Wagala case in northern Kenya, which case the TJRC tried to tackle, especially. So if you target a community, for example, you find me at the marketplace and you ask me, give me the gun or you die at 8 p.m. at night, what do you expect me to do? I am a teacher probably, I'm a chief, but you have a military operation that doesn't even differentiate, because first of all, it says everybody's guilty.
And the solution to insecurity in northern Kenya, he says,
the more we ignore these marginal areas, the more the center suffers. It is not a question of periphery and center. For a long time, we said pastoralists are always fighting until the proliferation of these guns arrived in Nairobi. And that's where we have security operations in Eastleigh. We have it in Mombasa. There's no corner in this world that is not attached to another one. So people should not ignore what is happening in Kapedo. What is happening on the borders of this country. It will come directly to your doorstep.
Semiride is inviting the president to the 11th Pastoralist Week so as to engage with the pastoralist communities and forge a way forward with the government with their endeavors in oil and power projects. Brian Ochieng, GBS News.